So I'm excited to be giving the keynote talk at this conference on global production networks and upgrading. And in that talk, what I really want to do is draw a kind of historical parallel between the struggle against sweatshops in the late 19th and early 20th century US garment district in New York and the debates around worker health and safety in Bangladesh today. And of course, that's a particularly acute issue in the aftermath of the Rana Plaza tragedy, in which over 1,100 garment workers in Bangladesh were killed. And what I do in this talk is essentially trace the history of the struggle against sweatshops in the US by showing how the Garment Workers Union in the United States, the International Lady Garment Workers Union, was able to create a solution essentially to the problem of hyper-competition in what was then a domestic supply chain for apparel production. Basically, what the union found was that they had a really hard time organizing workers and a really hard time securing workers' rights when the manufacturers were able to kind of shift their orders around to a lot of different unorganized contract shops. And so the solution that they seized upon was called triangular bargaining, which was an industrial relations system where they actually negotiated collective bargaining agreements with the employers, the contractors themselves, but also with the clients of the contractors, the manufacturers, which were basically committed to kind of keeping their production in unionized shops and ensuring that minimum wages and other benefits provided for in the collective bargaining agreements were covered in the prices that they were paying to the contractors. There's a lot of important, I think, parallels to the competition that we're seeing today in global supply chains, where the equivalent of those 19th and early 20th century manufacturers are big brands, essentially retailers in Europe and the United States. And they similarly are sort of able to stimulate a lot of competition among contractors now, not just in one particular city or one particular country, but really globally. And so the question is, is there a mechanism that might be analogous to the institution of triangular bargaining that was, developed over 100 years ago that could address some of these issues in today's global supply chains? And I, in the talk, end with a discussion of the Accord on Fire, Building, and Safety, which is an agreement that was developed in the aftermath of Rana Plaza that brings together global trade unions and local unions in Bangladesh with global brands, primarily European brands, some US brands as well. And what, under the Accord, those brands agree to do is to ensure that they disclose all of their suppliers in Bangladesh, that all of those suppliers are subject to a rigorous regime of independent factory monitoring and audits for building safety, and that those suppliers then remediate any of the problems that are identified through those audits to ensure that their workers are safe when they go to work. One of the limitations of the Accord is that it only addresses the issue of building and fire safety. It doesn't address a broader set of issues. There are also of concern around workers' wages and other aspects of working conditions and enabling rights like freedom of association. But the hope is that if you start with the Accord and you create a space, essentially, to ensure that worker voice is respected around issues of safety and health, that could enable a stronger voice for workers and collective mobilization and action that could address some of these broader issues going forward. So it's one possible solution that we're seeing right now to try to tackle what is really an old problem, which is essentially the downward pressure that hypercompetition puts on wages and working conditions for those essentially that labor at the bottom of these global supply chains.